What's up, YouTube? I'm coming back with another video. Today I'm going to be talking about comparing men and women in how they are romantic. Alright? This video is titled Men and Women Are Different Romantics. Men and women are different romantics. Men and women are different romantics. Society oftentimes views women as being hopeless romantics in relationships. The reality is not that case. In relationships, men are hopeless romantics. When it comes down to children, women are hopeless romantics. And I'll explain why. And I'm going to use an analogy that from none other than the wild, from none other than nature itself, all right? Because we're not separate of nature. We're animals like all the other animals. So I'm going to use an analogy from nature itself. If you're watching Discovery Channel, if you're watching Animal Planet, what gender fights over a mate? If you're looking at lions in a safari or Serengeti in Africa, or you're looking at macaque monkeys or whatever you're looking at on the screen, what gender fights over a mate? Males. Males. They fight over females. In fact, the reason that a male lion has a mane of fur around his head is because it protects his head from blows that he receives when sparring with other males. The reason that a buffalo has horns and a male deer has antlers is for the same reason. So when you think about that, when you see your girl talking to another guy and it pisses you off, all right, and it pisses you off, when you get pissed off, that pissed off emotional reaction is literally the reason for why the male lion has that mane of fur around his head. It is literally the reason for why the buffalo has those horns. And those are parts of their body, just like your hand is a part of your body. So it's literally in their genes, in their fucking physiology, that physically the way that their body is and organs and parts of the body that they have exist as a manifestation, an expression of that very response and the potential behind it. So when you see a guy talking to your girl and you get pissed, that getting pissed is as natural as feeling scared if someone pulls a gun on you. Now that does not mean that you should go and beat that guy up and fight with him. Society has a culture against that, and they have a culture against that for the reasons that violence erodes away the social order. All right? Everything that we view as something that is bad, we view as something that is bad or evil because it is bad for civilization. It's bad for the social order. Everything we view as a virtue and good is something that in essence is good for civilization. It's good for the social order. And so if you see a guy talking to your girl, you get pissed off, but we also condition people not to engage, we condition guys not to engage in such violence, because if guys were beating the shit out of each other over women and killing each other over women, society would fall apart, all right? It would be a complete denigration of the social order. So, males fight over females. All right. Who is making a bigger sacrifice when it comes down to mating? When it comes down to having sex, to spreading your seed, who is making the greater sacrifice? The males. Because they're fighting each other over a female. If you're fighting, you could get injured, you could get killed. If you're in the wild and you get injured, you practically are going to die. All right? That is a death sentence in many ways. So the male is making a greater sacrifice, right? The male is making a greater sacrifice. Love is measured in sacrifice. It's going to come key later in the video. Remember, love is measured in sacrifice. The male is making the greater sacrifice than the female when it comes down to mating. When it comes down to children, it's the other way around. If you're a mammal, the female gets pregnant. If the female is pregnant, she's vulnerable. She can get predated on very easily. If she's a predator, she can't really hunt very easily. And if she has an accident and has an injury, it can be fatal. And she could die giving birth. So she's making herself very vulnerable in the process of creating the child. And even egg-laying species, they'll often, the female will sit on the eggs and she won't go and eat. Oftentimes they starve to death. In fact, I'll use another analogy, like octopuses, spiders and octopuses. Whenever the male has sex, the minute he ejaculates, the female instantly attacks and eats the male. Instantly. So the male is essentially committing suicide in the process of mating. He ejaculates, he blows his load, and the female instantly attacks and kills him. And the female does that because the female is trying to protect the eggs, since she knows the male is going to eat them. So she kills the male before she lays them, so that he doesn't eat the eggs and kill the children. So in that respect, the male again is making the greater sacrifice. He's committing suicide in mating. In order to mate and spread his seed, he is literally committing suicide. The female octopus, she sits on her eggs for several months while they're incubating and developing until they hatch. She does not leave the eggs. She sits on her eggs for several months until they hatch, and by the time they hatch, she's already starved to death. So in the process of reproduction, the female will commit suicide. So the male commits suicide and the female commits suicide in every production of the next generation. And that's for all octopuses. But the male commits suicide in the process of mating. The female commits suicide in the process of developing the children. Of protecting and allowing the children to hatch, the eggs to hatch. So once again, you see, the male is making the greater sacrifice in mating. The female is making the greater sacrifice when it comes down to the children. And when you look in the wild, if you look at bears, for instance, you almost never see the father bear. He's not in the picture. But the mother bear, if you see little baby cubs, bear cubs, the mama is around. And if a mother bear sees you near her cubs, she will instantly go into attack mode. And anytime that an animal is attacking over protecting her children, it is the female. It is the female. I remember there was this one girl I knew. She said whenever she would come home from under like a crevice in the wall near the front door, this spider would just come running and charging at her, and that would make her freak out. And when I thought, when you think about it, that spider is a female. It's not a male. That's the female. The female spider probably knows, maybe not, is acting on an instinct. She can easily get squished by whatever it is that is there, that is a human. But she's going to charge anyway because she perceives a threat to her children, so she's going to make a sacrifice. Among humans, this dynamic between the male and female around children also applies. In third world countries, in war-torn countries, women, on average, by a significant margin, make sacrifices, much more sacrifices for their children. They will go without food so their kids can eat. They will get into harm's way to protect their children. A lot more so than the guys. Guys, on the other hand, a lot of guys pay child support. There's lots of guys that fuck around and probably have kids they don't even know about, and they're okay about that. And so, when you think about it, like, how many women would be okay about paying child support? How many women would, I'm not saying that guys, all guys are okay about that, and I don't agree with the whole child support situation that's going on in this country, but I'm just using this as an analogy. How many women would be content about having a child that they don't even know about? I've met plenty of guys who say, well, I probably slept with a woman, or I was sleeping with these women over here. I probably got kids with them. I probably got kids in some other country where I was traveling that I don't even know about. And they're content about that. How many women would be content about that? You see, when it comes down to relationships, the male makes the greater sacrifice. When it comes down to kids, the female makes the greater sacrifice. So when it comes down to relationships, because love is measured in sacrifice, the male is the hopeless romantic. When it comes down to children, the female is the hopeless romantic. That's why when you look at love movies, the man is always going through all this shit so that he can get the woman. Action movies, the guy is going through all this shit and so that eventually he can get the woman. The woman doesn't do anything. The man has to do all this shit and go through all of that bullshit in order to get to the point where he has the woman. Most love songs, they're made by guys. The best love songs, they're made by guys. I mean, there are some really good ones made by women, but the vast majority of them, they're made by guys. That's not a coincidence. That's not because, that's not because of sexism either. That is a manifestation of not just our nature, but of the nature of life on earth as a whole. The nature of life on earth as a whole. That's why, like, the man falls so deeply in love with the woman, and he's willing to go and do all this for the woman and write poems about her and all of that. And at the same time, we talk about the mother's love. Obviously, some people might be more attached to their father, depends on the experiences that they had, but in general, most people, they're more connected to their mother. There's something about the mother's love. Mothers, they're usually if we're looking at parents that are overprotective, usually they're mothers. Parents that spoil their kids, usually they're mothers. And then in a relationship, the person that does more of the work, the person that's spending more money, the person that's putting in more effort and doing more shit and making more sacrifice, it's the guy. You see? It's the guy. So a guy that, what we would call simping, that goes and does all this shit for this woman to have her, is the relationship equivalent of a smothering mother that does so much for her kids and spoils her kids. And then a guy that's controlling of his girl is the equivalent of a overprotective mother that is shielding her children. All right? For a lot of men, their woman becomes their life. For almost no women, their man becomes their life. But for lots of men, their woman becomes their life. For a lot of mothers, their children, in fact, for probably most mothers, their kids are their life. I mean, at least quite a lot of them. Their children are their life. So, in most relationships, unless the guy is empathetically challenged, empathetically challenged is like mentally challenged, just with empathy. What do I mean? A sociopath, a narcissist, a player type of guy, that's a guy that's empathetically challenged. All right, he's the emotional equivalent of a retarded person. All right, he suffers from emotional retardation. So a guy that's emotionally retarded, unless he's emotionally retarded, All right? Unless he's emotionally retarded. If he is an emotional guy and if he's got a good heart and if he's got morals, he will always love the woman more than she will love him. You can have a couple, guy and a girl, both of them loving individuals. The guy will always love her more than she will love him. I don't care how long they're together. They could be together until their death. Even at their death, he will always love her more than she will love him. Even after he dies. Maybe then that might be the exception. He will always love her more than she will love him. She may still love him. She may still love him dearly. But he will always love her more than she will love him. If they are separated, he will always be more hurt than she will be hurt. He will always be more heartbroken than she will be heartbroken. It will always take him a lot longer to deal with that than for her. He'll probably abuse substances a lot more to cope with it than she would. That's just the way that it is. But then likewise, let's say that someone's child was sent to Iraq and this person got killed. Both parents will be devastated. The mother is going to be a lot more devastated. My mom, I have one brother, an older brother. After my older brother, my mom had a miscarriage. Then she had me. I remember even 17 years after the fact, she still talked about that miscarriage. She was still emotionally affected by that miscarriage. Even fucking almost 20 years after the fact, it still depressed her. It still affected her. My dad, he probably didn't care less. Maybe like at the time, sure, but he moved on a lot faster than my mom. Way faster. My mom, she was married to someone before she immigrated to this country. And she was married for 6 years. That man was deeply in love with her. She loved that man as well. She ended up getting separated from him. It's a really long story. Her family basically made an ultimatum where she had to choose between him and them, and they were leaving the country, and the political situation was bad, and she came to the United States. She ended up divorcing that guy who was a raving alcoholic, but he loved her dearly. He was begging that she doesn't leave. He sent letters to her from overseas for years, asking her to come back. He loved her to death. His alcoholism got worse. He did get remarried to somebody. He got married to somebody else, but his alcoholism kept getting worse. And he died when he was around 44 years of age from a blood stroke, most likely caused by his alcoholism. He essentially grieved himself to death. You see, to him, that divorce is what that miscarriage was to my mother. Again, in most cases, the woman is going to love the child more deeply than the man. The man will love the child, and a father's love is very important and very much underappreciated in today's society. But the mother's love is always going to have that more significant element. The mother is almost, unless she's a psychopath, or a narcissist, she's going to be more heavily affected. She's going to be more devastated if the child dies. She'll remember that shit till her death. Right? Anyone whose child died, like when I talk to people whose children have died, both men or women, they're devastated, but the woman is always more devastated. Always significantly more devastated over the loss of her child than the guy. You see, because, again, in relationships, men are the hopeless romantics with children, women are the hopeless romantics. This is not men are good, or men are bad, women are good, women are bad, men are good. This is just the way that nature is. It's not just a human phenomena, it's the animal kingdom. That's as true about spiders as that is about humans. It is just the way that nature is designed. It's hardwired. It's hardwired. And so it's important to recognize that. You know, men and women are hopeless romantics in different ways, over different things. But the problem is society oftentimes tries to view women as being hopeless romantics in relationships when that's not true. And they try to view women as being hopeless romantics in everything. And that isn't true. And then they try to view men as being aromantic in everything, which again isn't true. And so in order to have a healthy society, both men and women need to understand and appreciate each other, for that difference, all right? For that yin and yang, and not have it such that you have this, you know, the situation that we have in our society, we have a lot of sexual confusion. In our society, there's a lot of sexual confusion. And I think in order to have a healthy society, you know, people need to understand why men are the way that they are, why women are the way that they are. Both need to understand each other for why they are the way that they are, so that they can appreciate without judgment each other, all right? But instead, our society is one-sided, where the men have to understand women all the way, and the women are not supposed to understand men, and then the men are supposed to go even a step further and compensate in the lack of understanding on the part of women. And that's not because there's nothing bad about women or any of that. This is just about the culture, all right? There's got to be a mutual understanding and respect and appreciation for each other, because the male and female dynamic and nature are like the yin and yang. They're like yin and yang. North and South Pole magnets. You know, that you need both. You need both. The Earth has a North Pole and a South Pole. That's why it has a magnetic field around the planet. You need both. But we live in a society that likes to think that there is only one. And that creates confusion. That creates a lot of sexual confusion that exists in our society. And a lot more so than in other societies. And then back in the day, even here, when there was more appreciation and when there was more understanding. So, men and women, they're both hopeless romantics, but they're hopeless romantics about different things. In relationships, men are hopeless romantics, but women are practical lovers. In children, women are hopeless romantics, men are practical lovers. Done.